Good morning, good afternoon to all of you who are connecting now. We will start shortly with the webinar. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Thanks for connecting to this MAPS Assessment of Mauritius launch event. We will hear today findings and recommendations of the assessment in Mauritius. And we would like, first of all, to go quickly through some of our rules for the day. So as usual, this webinar is being recorded and we will publish the recording of it on our website very soon, as well as the presentations that we will hear today. Please do submit your questions via the Zoom chat function or on social media using #MapsMauritius. To start, I would like to invite Mr. Ramho Jun, Director, PPO Mauritius, to provide some opening remarks. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicholas. There are greetings from Mauritius to all of you in all time zones. Mauritius was known as the star and key of the Indian Ocean by the British when they were venturing to India and the Far East, and now it's the Paradise Island. Well, with the assistance of the World Bank, a country procurement assessment was carried out for Mauritius in 2002 on the procurement system. 20 years have elapsed since then. Government of Mauritius implemented recommendation in the CPAR. These include introduction of the Public Procurement Act in 2006, development of a public procurement regulations in 2008, setting up of a central procurement board, a policy office, an independent review panel. Thereafter, implementation of electronic procurement system in 2015. Provision of training for public procurement staff in ministries, departments, and parastatal bodies was also carried out during that period. And we have engaged in procurement compliance in audit practices. Well, the introduction of the EPS constituted a fundamental change in the public procurement landscape. Since then, the use of the EPS has become mandatory, and even the island of Rodrigues, which is situated about 600 kilometers to the northwest of Mauritius, has also been roped into the system. Each year at budget time, the Ministry of Finance has been addressing issues to improve the legislative framework in the light of representations from stakeholders and from experience in the application of the Public Procurement Act. It thus became imperative after 20 years to carry out an in-depth assessment of the procurement system. In March 2018 and in August 2019, the Ministry of Finance, through the Financial Secretary, approached the AFDB and the World Bank to collaborate with government in carrying out an assessment on our procurement system using MAPS 2 as a tool. It was also agreed that AFDB would lead the assessment exercise with peer review and technical support provided by the World Bank as part of its assistance. After appointment of consultants by AFDB, the MAPS assessment started in December 2020 and covered central government, local government, and parastatal organizations. Several virtual missions were held up to September 2021, followed by physical implementation cum validation mission in November 2021. A final draft of the findings and recommendations of the MAPS assessment was submitted in March 2022 to the Procurement Policy Office. On the basis of this report, the PPO has initiated some action, for example, undertaking a review of the procurement legal framework to enhance user friendliness by linking the PPA, the PPR, and the directives. Actions initiated for resumption of professional competence examinations, certification and monitoring in collaboration with University of Technology of Mauritius for all procurement cadre is starting from March this year. The collection of data is underway to investigate reasons for low participation rates of bidders. Action to remove potential barriers will thereafter be initiated with the objective of improving competition. As from March this year, senior management in government will be inducted into the mechanism for monitoring contract performance. Furthermore, a project management cadre course will be held in batches of 30 participants, leading to a postgraduate certificate in project management. This will strengthen and empower post-contract award monitoring. As you may be aware, yesterday the AFDB officially handed over to government the Mauritius MAPS 2 assessment report. This was held at a dissemination workshop where most of the stakeholders were present. I will, of course, leave it to Mr. Debising later to give you an insight on the way forward. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rampojun, for those words. I would like to give now the floor to Clément Aossi, Procurement Manager at the African Development Bank.
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas. My warm welcome to all participants to this afternoon webinar. Allow me to start by thanking the government of Mauritius through PPO for the leadership during this assessment, which has been a tedious but exciting work. At the request of the government, the African Development Bank led the assessment of the public procurement system of Mauritius using MAPS methodology in close partnership with national authorities led by the Minister of Finance, represented by PPO, and with major technical support from the World Bank. The assessment commenced in December 2020. They faced some challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly for sampling and data collection, and necessitating some more online and virtual engagement with stakeholders than initially planned. The assessment involved various methods, including interviews with contracting authorities from the ministries, departments, state-owned enterprises, private sector, civil society organization. The African Development Bank is thankful for all the entities and organizations for their valuable input and contribution to the assessment. The report identified both strengths and weaknesses of the country public procurement system, but also provide recommendations that will help the government to make informed policy reforms decisions to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the public procurement system and ensuring integrity and transparency in the use of public funds. I would like to ensure that the African Development Bank stand ready with other partners to help the government with the implementation of this recommendation. Let me also acknowledge the important support and guidance that the team received from our director, Mr. Frank Mbula, Director of Fiduciary Services and Implementation Department of the African Development Bank. So I would like to thank everyone, and I wish us a very successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Clément. So to get us started, first, we would like to hear about findings and recommendations that are found in this MAPS assessment. For that, I would first like to invite Amilcar Bilale, Regional Procurement Coordinator at the African Development Bank, to provide us with an overview from the bank of what you found. And then we will continue with the World Bank and also hearing about, from the consultant, more detailed findings, both strengths and weaknesses of all pillars. So Amilcar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicholas, and good day for everyone. We'll start by sharing some of the experience during the assessment process. After the funds from the African Development Bank and were secured and the team was in place, the team from African Development Bank, PPO, and the World Bank, we had a kickoff meeting in December 2020. And the preparation of the assessment was completed with a launching workshop to create awareness to all the stakeholders, but also to clarify their roles during the assessment. The assessment began around May 2021 with the data collection, processing, and also with the virtual meetings with the stakeholders. Just to mention that the launching workshop was held virtually, and also the first steps of the engagement with stakeholders. We held a validation workshop to validate the preliminary findings of the assessment, and that allowed the team to finalize the drafting of the report that was submitted for quality assurance in April 2021. The quality assurance process included peer review from the African Development Bank, from the World Bank, as well as review and certification by the MAP Secretariat and ATAG. The report was finally certified and published in November 2022. And as highlighted by both Mr. Rambujan and Mr. Ose, the government of Mauritius started implementation of some of the recommendations even before the finalization of the report. So we would like to share some of the positive experience throughout this process. First of all, the outstanding commitment and engagement by the PPO. That this partnership with the assessment team, with the development partners, was very important in having this assignment completed on time, despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. We had to hold the first meetings, including the launch workshop, virtually, but it also was helpful to lay the ground and to have very focused in-person meeting during the missions to the country when the traveling conditions permitted. The participation of other public institutions besides the PPO and the Ministry of Finance is also one thing we need to commend. The availability, both during the virtual interactions and during the missions we organized. As we emphasized before, some of the recommendations were promptly put into action. which these will be further discussed by Mr. Dabisin through his presentation, and also Mr. Nagaraju from the World Bank. Some of the challenges also that we faced and how we overcame these challenges included, of course, the remote working during COVID. We started the assessment during the height of the COVID, and also they were challenging engaging with the civil society organizations and private sector. So the virtual meetings, again, they were very important to overcome these challenges. Our engagement with civil society and private sector was not limited to the questionnaires or the surveys, but we also had opportunity to engage directly with them. We organized during the virtual meetings with private sector and civil society organizations, and also during our presence in Mauritius. There were also challenges on the sampling and data collection. I think the support that has been already provided by the African Development Bank on the assessment of the e-procurement system in Mauritius following the core assessment, this assessment is ongoing using the pilot version of the supplementary module. We'll also address some of the challenges we had during the collection of data. We also have had issues in identifying local consultants to support the data collection in the country. And after we identified the consultant, he resigned during a very critical stage, that was the data processing. So we had to resort to some additional support from PPO, and also to hiring an international consultant to complete the assignment. Thank you very much. Those are some of the lessons the team wanted to share.
Thank you, Amilcar. As this assessment was led by the African Development Bank and also countered with the participation of the World Bank, I would like now to invite Nagaraju Duthaluri, lead procurement specialist, to provide the view from the World Bank about this assessment.
Thank you, Nicholas. Good morning and good afternoon, participants. Mauritius is a star performer in Africa East. It's not only paradise, it is also a paradise for the procurement community. They were early adapters of institutional reforms, legal framework, and have set up the e-procurement systems early on. When the government requested for MAPS assessment, we were quite excited, and we joined the African Development Bank. We provided staff support, particularly in the e-procurement. We also peer reviewed the final report. The vision and commitment of the government is, not only in starting the assessment and taking on early on the implementation of recommendations. As part of country partnership framework, which is under discussion now, the government has asked the bank to support three key recommendations of the MAPS report. They are to review the Public Procurement Act to align with the e-procurement system, including set of regulations, guidance manual, and standard procurement documents, and to set up a procurement portal to disclose bidding opportunities, contract awards, including beneficiary ownership, which is again a transformational initiative following open contracting data standards to improve transparency and competition. Another aspect which came out in the MAPS assessment report is they have a very good compliance, independent complaint review system, but it is not integrated with e-procurement system. So this is another area identified as a area for improvement. So this is also the bank will work with the government to improve this, integrating the complaint review system into the next generation of e-procurement system, which the government is expected to roll out in future, to improve effectiveness of the system and to build trust and accountability. So these are some of the recommendations which the government is going ahead with the implementation, and the bank will partner with the government along with AFDB. The Mauritius is one of the example of a country which had a good procurement system. Even way back in 2002, the Mauritius was one of the candidate country for use of country systems those days. After the Paris, the development effectiveness declaration, the use of, and it went through and the pilot was dropped later. So, this shows that a good public procurement systems could be also assessed and improved. So that is the vision and commitment of the government of Mauritius. I really thankful to BPO for giving us this opportunity to partner with and do this MAPS report. And you will hear more from Devesh on exactly what are the pillar-wise recommendations and the challenges during assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nagaraju. And as you were saying, we would like then to hear from Devesh Mishra, who was the expert and lead consultant for this assessment, on the key findings, gaps found, as well as recommendations per pillar. So as you know, we have a limited time. So over to you, Devesh, on a quick overview per pillar of what you found. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. And thank you, Mr. Rambhajan, Cleme, Amilcar, Nagaraju. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Devesh Mishra, and I work as a part of the consultant team hired by the African Development Bank, which besides me consisted of Suji Smith as a legal expert and Tiago to provide the input on the quantitative part, in particular on Pillar 3. As Nicholas is saying that, well, we have to be very quick in terms of the putting up the essence of this report, which is rather difficult in a period, in a space of about, I think about 15, 18 or maximum 20 minutes, but let me attempt. You would see that in the previous, I think in the previous slide, if we can go, yeah. We are very happy to find this MAP seal of approval, and you feel very happy looking at it. And if you go through this report, it is already on the MAP's website. Volume 1 contains a very small executive summary. Then you have volume 2, which is a matrix, and volume 2 is the detail. On the right side, you are seeing a picture on the executive summary of the assessment of public procurement system. The team prepared a sort of a brochure or a summary in about 15 to 20 pages on the executive summary, which also contains, as Mr. Rambhajan was saying, this Paradise Island. The assessment team did not forget to capture the natural beauty of Mauritius, and many of the pictures in this you will see in executive summary have been contributed by the team members. Next slide, please. Relating to Pillar 1, and I'm not going to explain in detail, you all know Pillar 1 is relating to the legal framework. So the procurement and legal framework underpins a mature procurement system. We noted many strengths under Pillar 1. In particular, the framework is well established with clear underlying principles and aim. We found it to be comprehensive and accessible. There is a good range of procurement methods, and open advertising bidding is the default. Eligibility and qualifications requirements are well described. Further, we noted a very prompt response by Procurement Policy Office to the COVID-19 pandemic situation and with later changes which was made to the legal framework, reflecting learning from the pandemic experience. Next slide, please. In addition, what we found, and we are going into key areas and gaps. Fact is, on pillar 1, there are more areas of improvement rather than gaps. It is a very strong pillar in terms of, as all speakers have said, over the past 20 years, it has evolved into a very mature legal system with all the improvements having been made till date. But there are few things which I would call more areas of improvement, not exactly a gap. It is the complexity of the legal framework, updating and modernization. It could be made more user-friendly and accessible. And the legal framework, in a way, I could say it is showing its age, and there is a need for updating and modernizing, in particular, to align with e-procurement system. Regarding sustainable, and you would see that users guide, manuals, SBDs, they are all to be updated, and you would hear from others that PPO has already taken action to improve it. Then comes the this sustainable public procurement. So we found at the time of assessment that there was no policy or strategy, though in the budget papers of 2021, the government did acknowledge that they will develop SPP, and there were recommendations to support the developments. Another area we found, which is a gap, I think it is a gap, is the barrier to entry. And we have, it happened at the time we were about to complete the assessment that there was a requirement that foreign bidders must collaborate with local contractors and consultants in the delivery of construction works and specified construction-related consultancy services with sanctions of breach. Our concern is that this creates a barrier to entry for foreign bidders, which may undermine economy and efficiency of the system, being a potential disincentive to participation and reducing the ease of doing business in Mauritius. Next slide, please. On pillar 2, what we found in terms of key strength, that there is a strong institutional arrangement on normative regulatory bodies. First of all, PPO, which is responsible for formulation of policy. In fact, their name itself, it is called Procurement Policy Office. So that is how they have defined themselves. It is more a policy, and they do not get into transactions. And then you have this Central Procurement Board, who are responsible for handling large value and large value contracts. Of course, you have other speakers have said that there is a well-constructed independent review panel. And of course, there are public bodies who are responsible for carrying out their respective procurement in compliance with PPA. We further found that there is a strong leadership and political commitment on mandatory use of e-procurement. In fact, since 1st January 2021, it has been made mandatory. There are also good initiatives on strengthening PFM system. This Ministry of Finance, they issued a circular in October 2021, constituted what you call is a project implementation and monitoring agency, PIMA, and this will address impediments in the implementation of capital projects and ensure that these impediments are expeditiously dealt with and projects are completed in time. You will find it later as one of the weakness when you go to the indicator 9, and I am sure that with this new initiative that will be addressed. Another strong point is the procurement and supply cadre of 340 officers under the aegis of Ministry of Finance, and it is headed by a director. and they have the responsibility to promote efficient and effective public procurement and supply system based on international best practices. Next slide, please. In terms of gaps, what we found that there is a disjointed institutional arrangement for major contracts. I have referred earlier to Central Procurement Board. So in between they come, but the bidding documents are all prepared by the public bodies. Then it comes to the Central Procurement Board. Of course, the government has taken action of raising the threshold of contracts which should come to Central Procurement Board. But for these major contracts, it creates a sort of a back and forth and insufficient involvement of public bodies. And with a result that there is a lack of building of competence in doing procurement, because if you have to really learn procurement, you have to go through the pain of doing procurement. Let me repeat, pain of doing the procurement, being responsible for it, and then only you learn, and then only you improve. So there is a diffused accountability. That is what we find. To the extent what we found that in the selection and evaluation process, these public bodies are not involved. In fact, the Central Procurement Board, at the time we assessed, they did not even provide the public bodies with full bid evaluation. So, okay, well, this is the bidder who is the winning bidder, and even the copies of the unsuccessful bidders. So these are some of the gaps. Government is working on this, how to see that the accountability of public bodies are improved. This point, second bullet, which is the EPS, is not end-to-end. And fact is that even though you have a well-developed EPS, it is not put to full use. Other speakers have also talked about it. And there is no data analytics. Of course, open contracting data standards, I know the view of the MAP Secretariat, it is not a gap as such. Frankly, it is more an area of improvement, but the government is already taking actions to incorporate the features, which is a de facto industry standard on open contracting data standards. Now, professionalization of procurement. See, procurement is not recognized as a profession akin to accountancy. And there is no evidence of procurement positions defined at different professional levels, job descriptions, which requisite qualifications and competencies. And of course, you will hear, you have already heard from Mr. Rambhajan, you will hear further from Mr. Devi Singh regarding action being taken to correct it. Organization, funding, and staffing of PPO, in our view, are inadequate. The kind of staffing which they have is more coming more from secondment from other departments or contract staff. So in our view, this requires a relook how to increase the funding and staffing of PPO so that they can fulfill their mandate in totality as required by the Public Procurement Act, PPA. Next slide, please. This is one area where timely processing of payment, I'm going to pillar 3 now, which is how the contract operates in practice. We could not find statistical data on payment. And as other speakers were saying, that we have a problem in terms of data, and EPS is not that evolved and you don't have. But from multiple sources indicated that there is no evidence of systemic problem with delayed payments. It was not a point of complaint, which generally happens in any private sector survey or anybody. This was not a point of complaint on delayed payment. Regarding to transparency, which is the compliance on publication requirements, as you can see in this diagram, there was a high level of compliance, and practically it was conducted in full compliance with the publications requirement, mostly, as you can see it from the diagram. Next slide, please. Based on samples, and there were, I think, 113 samples contract, and we had about 15, 16 public bodies and agencies. We found something which is systemic, and which is lack of needs analysis or market research. In 50% of sampled cases, they were not identified in advance in the procurement plan. And of course, procurement plan is not just complying with the law. It is also a tool in project implementation, which means that from the time of needs analysis up to the time it is the project is delivered, you need to have an individual procurement plan. And those who are in project management, they are aware of it. I'm glad that there is a cadre of project management being developed. Probably that will be taken care of in terms of how the whole procurement process means from the time the need is identified to the time the need is satisfied, which means the facility is put into operation. And I think that will be taken care of in future. Now, there were delays in selection and award process. And what we found that particularly in 38 of the national open advertised bidding, they were, though they were awarded, about 53% were awarded within the initial validity. I think that is one index we can take of delays in selection and award. Are you awarding the contract within the initial validity? In this case, only 53% were awarded. So that is an area to see that there is a full compliance on this selection and award process. Time overruns in contract implementation, we found particularly in the case of works contract for 44% cases, which is 24 cases, there were delays. And for 28% of the cases, which is 28%, which is 31 cases, there were no data available. Particularly in terms of time overruns, we could not find any data. Then there was, based on the sample, there was limited use of sustainable public procurement. In fact, one element we find is that are you doing it on just on the lowest evaluated price, or are you looking at the total price, including the life cycle costing? We could not find any evidence on that. Multi-stage procedure, there was no case we could find, because in case of complex procurement, you have to go through a multi-stage procedure. With regard to engagement of civil society, only 10 out of 109 where we could observe there was some engagement of civil society. Practically, it was lacking as far as the engagement of civil society is concerned. Next slide, please. This is a feedback coming from private sector, which is again the other, which is the indicator 10. First of all, you will observe that despite our best efforts with all the support coming from PPO, we could get input only from 29 participants out of 100. This is not very good, and this is not a very robust response coming from I would say this is one of the gaps that they were not giving the feedback. And based on whatever feedback they have given, I am just saying maybe these are not fully representative because it is based on only 29. But what was told was this procurement rules are not simple. I am not taking meaning out of it. I'm just giving the raw feedback which was given by this private sector, that procurement rules not simple or flexible. Then the timeframes for delivery, and I think this is a fact that COVID-19, it unfairly impacted the SMEs. The fact is, if you look at the PPO office data, the share of business of SME, it was 20%. It declined to 10% during the pandemic. Of course, I have seen the latest report, which is not latest, the last year's report, which was published, and it has slightly increased the share of business of SMEs. EPS, they are talking about insufficient transparency, communication, technical issues. As it is a feedback, it has to be dealt with by a proper dialogue. I'm not a specialist on e-procurement. There are, but if this feedback is coming, it has to be taken care of. One area of concern is the tailored technical specification. And I would say that this is what you call is the script writers, that you prepare a technical specification or qualification requirement which determines who is going to be the winning bidder. This was an area of concern stated by several, which if it is a tailored technical specification, of course, it is going to impact competition. Then what is also going to impact competition is unfair allocation of risks and responsibilities in the contract. And maybe we have to take a look at it. What exactly do they mean in terms of unfair allocation? Next slide, please. In pillar 4, I think this is one of the strongest pillar. If you really look at in totality, you will find that pillar 1 is very strong. Pillar 4 is also very strong. The trouble is in pillar 2 and pillar 2 due to disjointed institutional responsibility, and pillar 3, of course, due to how the contracts are executed and how selection process is done. So in pillar 4, of course, there is a effective and a coordinated control and audit system. There is a National Audit Office, which is the supreme audit institution with a constitutional mandate regarding this ethics. They have a strong ethics and anti-corruption, and you have an independent commission against corruption, which has the core function to lead and implement and administer the prevention, education, and enforcement of this for fighting corruption as per the Prevention and Corruption Act 2002. And ICAC, I think I found one of the most engaging out of several maps that I have done in terms of engagement. They were very proactive. If you go to their website, and I would encourage others to go to the website of ICAC in Mauritius, which has developed several best practices guide, including on procurement specific guidance on direct procurement and how do you manage a works contract, more from the point of view of integrity risks. And it is a document worth reading. Very good work by ICAC there. Now, regarding independent review body, as I have said earlier, they have a well-defined challenge and appeals mechanism, and with a range of remedies, publications of decisions. So that is another strength. Next slide, please. Again, this area, it is coming and again, is the lack of engagement with civil society. Practically, it is non-existent. Let me put it like this. You have very few who are active in the area. There are some who are active in the area of governance, like Transparency International Mauritius. You have another one, Mauritius Council of Social Services, MACOS, but their focus is not procurement. So I would say that there is a lack of engagement and there is a need for finding ways how to bring them into the fold. Now, National Audit Office independence, this is a gap which was recognized by NOA itself, and they said that their independence is to be increased further as a model supreme audit institution in accordance with precepts of Lima and Mexico Declaration on Independence of State Audit Institution. The third bullet is relating to declaration of asset, and as I have said that it is not, it has to be applicable as per the methodology for all officials, irrespective of level. So it is all based on the level. But there could be, let me start with someone who is writing a technical specifications. I call them script writers. They determine who is going to be the winner. So those who are writing technical specifications on one end, on the other end, those who are responsible for making payments. Now, these two examples are the officials involved in the procurement process and subject to integrity issues. Now, this is declaration of asset is not applicable for all officials because it is based on the level. So that is one of the gap we found. Another area, which is the cost of independent review, it is a disincentive. We noted that it is possible for IRB to conduct a review without a hearing, but the standard practice is for applicant to request a hearing with in person with potentially costly legal representation. And there was a mention by many stakeholders in our discussions that it is a disincentive for use of independent review. This IRB also lacks specific legal powers to enforce orders, and there is no formal enforcement mechanism to guarantee compliance. So next slide, please.
David, sorry,
Now-
if I may suggest to go over maybe the recommendations, maybe in a more in a faster way, taking
Okay.
into account that Mr.
Okay,
Davison will
okay.
also speak about recommendations and how they are moving forward.
Yeah, I will. I think I
Thank
will
you.
go very quickly. I am aware of it. I will go in. I will finish in 2 minutes. The legal and regulatory framework, we have already pointed out the gap, so we don't have to repeat it again. There is a need for comprehensive review. Institutional, we have already talked about it with regard to major contracts, since I have talked about the gap. So the role of a central procurement board has to be of an enabler and not really hijacking the whole system and being a sort of a source of a delay there. Then sustainable procurement, there is a need to implement SPP framework. Next slide, please. E-procurement, complete rollout and end-to-end uses. Incorporate OCTS, again an area of improvement. CSO engagement, there is a need to empower and encourage homegrown and independent CSOs to participate in monitoring the contract implementation. Next slide, please. Professionalization, there is a need to establish a regulatory body, and I think Devi Singh is going to talk about it. Practical case-based, study-based training, maybe professional internship with PPO or with National Audit Office. Then asset declaration, I have already said that it has to be applicable for everybody who is in the entire procurement process. The last point is, of course, accountability and decision making. And here, what is required is there is a paper which is on a website of this ICAC, which is exercise of discretionary power. So there has to be an enabling environment in which you are encouraged to take decision, of course, based on the discretion, which is well recorded, well documented. Finally, last point is procurement and contracts delivery. It is to improve. I think it has to improve. There has to be someone responsible for the whole process. And I would say that from the point the need is identified to the time the needs is satisfied. So there is a need for market analysis. There is a need for avoiding restrictive requirement. I will not go into the detail due to the lack of time. There is, because it is a technical point, discontinue points-based evaluation, and there has to be a mechanism for contract performance monitoring, which I believe is already being taken care of. So I will come to the end, because MAPS assessment report is just a tool, and government of Mauritius, they have to prioritize their reform. And you will find that PPO has already taken a lot of action to implement some of these reform efforts, and more information is available. As far as AFDB is concerned, they are already financing an ongoing assessment using the pilot version of the maps for e-procurement supplementary module. The task is started in end of 2022. So this brings to an end my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. It was a pleasure working on this task, and I stop here. Thank you very much, Nicholas.
Thank you, Devesh. Sorry for doing this in
No.
this manner, but I think it provides a quick overview to
Yes.
participants. And of course, we would encourage everyone here to go and read the full assessment on our website. So as we've already heard about what was found and what was recommended in the assessment, I'd like to hear from Mr. Dabising, member PPO in Mauritius. What is the way forward for Mauritius? What are you already implementing, and what are the plans to implement the pending recommendations? So over to you, Mr. Dabising.
Thank you, Nicholas. Good evening and good morning to all of you. As rightly said, can we move on to the slides, please? The MAPS assessment team has made suggestions for improvement. These suggestions for improvement have been proposed to help in guiding the government of Mauritius in the strategic planning process for future public reform, to clarify the vision, goals, and time frame to improve the public procurement system. Suggestions for improvement are included as recommendation. I will move on to the third slide straight away. I will move to next slide, please. Next slide, because otherwise we won't have time, right? Priority areas for improvement of the public procurement system. Priority areas for improvement of the Mauritian public procurement system have been classified with reference to 4 pillars of the MAPS methodology. These measures prescribe or align with the reform initiative of the government of Mauritius and aim at implementing improvement that have already started in some of the areas. I think Devesh has already mentioned all the pillars. Can we move on to the next slide? Pillar number 1. What we have done up to now, we have already awarded a contract to a legal expert in November 2022 in order to come up with an appropriate TOR for the appointment of a consultant or a consultancy firm to work on the review of the procurement legal framework as recommended under Pillar 1. And secondly, which is not there on the slide, we have already also awarded the contract to an e-procurement EPS expert that have been awarded in November 22 to come up with a TOR for the appointment of a consultant or consultant firm to review, revamp, and ensure that a user-friendly electronic procurement system is put in place. And the third one is the same consultant, the legal consultant or consultancy firm will come up with proposal for the implementation plan for sustainable public procurement. Provision will be made in the PPA to address this issue. And the other thing that we have done, a user-friendly guide for procedure for appeal has been announced in the budget 2022-2023, and we are waiting for the IRP to come up with this proposal. Let's move on to the slide. Pillar number 2. Institutional framework and management capacity. So the PPO, as at date, the PPO is in collaboration with the University of Technology, will, as from the month of March 2023, launch a course leading to a postgraduate certificate in project management and contract administration for officers involved in managing capital projects. This is already done. The syllabus have been prepared and students are submitting their names. In order to build up the capacity of senior officials to understand the project management and contract administration language, the PPO, in collaboration with the University of Technology, will organize 3 workshops run over a span of 3 days each in the month of March. So all of them having 30 respondents. So we are starting this on the 8th of March. We have taken the action to increase the prescribed amount for handling procurement contract by Central Procurement Board and public bodies. We were given to understand that Central Procurement Board takes a lot of time in vetting the documents. So we have increased the prescribed amount so that less project goes to the CPB and more projects are implemented at the level of public bodies and local authorities. Pillar number 3, please. Next slide, please. So under pillar number 3, we have, with a view to improve competition in public procurement, PPO has already initiated action to investigate the reasons why there are low participation rate of bidders. Once this exercise is completed, potential barriers will be identified and removed. Pillar number 4, please. Now, these are the recommendations that are waiting for implementation. PPO is presently working on the professionalization of the procurement and supply cadre by proposing training courses at the university level. Courses are due to start in the academic year, starting in March 2023. Concerning the setting up of the regulatory body to support the professionalization of procurement and supply management officials and build a cadre of qualified, competent, and motivated procurement workforce, same will be taken up by the legal expert when the procurement legal framework will be revisited. The contract monitoring apps on the EPS electronic procurement system will be tested and made accessible for use by public bodies. It is also expected that the electronic procurement expert will come up with proposal to enable the installation of OCDS and the GovTech app on the EPS as soon as possible. Next slide, please. PPO will come up with a guidance note on project procurement strategy for development for public bodies, covering proactive identification of optimal procurement strategies and choosing an appropriate procurement method based on the market situation. PPO to initiate action to empower, encourage, and build capacity of homegrown, credible, and independent civil society organizations to participate in monitoring procurement processes and contract implementation. PPO and the Independent Commission Against Corruption to collaborate to detect cases of fraud and corruption and expedite integration of collusion screening tools and software within the EPS. Creation of enabling environment to encourage exercise of discretionary powers based on the ICAC guidance. Finally, the next slide. So this will be a long-term sort of strategy. Rules on participation, norms on safekeeping of record, document, and electronic data, provision for sustainable public procurement, definition and responsibilities and formal powers of procuring entities, key sectors and sector strategies, enabling environment for public consultation and monitoring, direct engagement of civil society and stakeholder support to strengthen integrity in procurement. These are some of the recommendations that might take some time because we have to await for the preliminary recommendation to be set up before moving on to this. Thank you for your attention, and I suppose I was on time. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Rabizing, thank you so much for going over those slides in such an efficient manner, because we are indeed on time and we completed all the presentations within the hour. So actually we have a couple of minutes to ask some questions. I see that there's interest in building on what you just said about those recommendations that are pending implementation. The audience would like to hear more about the plans and actually also how you are collaborating with the banks to move forward. So I know that there's already work, and maybe you could speak a bit about the status of the e-procurement module that is being piloted in Mauritius, and after that also how you are collaborating with the banks, and also Amilcar, Nagaraju, feel free to chime in with what's the view from the banks in moving forward with the rest of the recommendations.
Yeah, I think first of all, I have to tell you that this report will be presented to the cabinet next week, and once they get the cabinet approval, we are going to come up with an action plan of a short-term, middle-term, and long-term implementation. This is the first part of it, and the second part of it, of course, there is already a collaboration with African Development Bank for the legal expert and the EPS expert who are working on term of reference to appoint for consulting firm to address these two issues. And the third point that you mentioned is the collaboration with the World Bank. I think Mr. Nagaraju already said it. There is a country strategy paper. There are 3 issues that have been identified. These will be taken care, and once we get the clearance from government, these will be implemented in parallel. I think these are a bit the issues. We are collaborating, definitely. There is a strong collaboration between African Development Bank and ourselves. And on the other hand, with the implementation part, there is a strong collaboration also with the World Bank, which is ongoing. This is approximately, I don't know if it meets all the expectation of the questions, but I think basically there is a need for an action plan, and this action plan will be done once this report gets the clearance from the cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rabizing. I think that is also important in terms of how to make actionable recommendations that move forward. So as we've seen from other assessments, it's important that those action plans establish both low-hanging fruits that may be implemented in a short time period, but also the more complex ones. And it's good to hear that you are already in consultations to move that forward. And finally, last thing about the e-procurement module, because I think that's also one of the key aspects that you highlighted about improving the EGP system, inclusion of OCDS. How is that going forward in Mauritius now?
Okay, the EGP is working. We call it EPS in Mauritius. So the EPS is working perfectly from 2015. It is now mandatory that all projects be all bids are processed electronically. This is mandatory now. It has been mentioned in the budget of our government in 2021. But there is one thing that is the shortcoming is that I agree with the consultant. People are not doing the evaluation on the system. So we are concentrating now with the part of training of evaluators so that they can do the evaluation online. And we have, of course, over the past 7-8 years that we started working on the electronic procurement, we do have some bugs, we do have some problem, I agree with it, but this is being resolved as and when it comes up. But now with the help of the electronic procurement expert that has been appointed by us with the help of African Development Bank, he is looking at all the shortcomings and all the details to prepare a term of reference so that we appoint a consultant or a consulting firm to come and address all those issues and to give us a more user-friendly system, because you have to realize this system dates back to 2015. It started in 2013, operational in 2015. So it's quite an old system. I would say it's quite an old electronic system. Electronic system over 8 years, you need to revisit the system. So this is what we are going to do very soon. We are going to revisit the system and see to it that it is rolled out and inclusive of OCDS and inclusive of GovTech, which is an app that also identified ex-ante collusion or bid rigging in certain while doing the procurement exercise.
Thank you, Mr. Dabising, and thank you, colleagues. I think we've reached the hour, so thank you for your participations to our distinguished speakers, and we look forward to having more interaction with all the audience. Please do go to our website, read the MAPS assessment of Mauritius, and feel free also to check the e-learning program that we launched yesterday that I think will be very, very beneficial to the larger audience of MAPS present today. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you in a future occasion.
Thank you to the panel, and thank you, Nicolas. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to
Thanks.
all of you.
Bye.
Thank you to all of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.